Hi, 7th grade. Welcome back. Today is Friday. I'm actually making this video on Thursday, so the data is incomplete. 73 students have taken the exit ticket. Please make sure to take the exit ticket. It really does help you understand what you know and what you don't know. So during the Middle Ages, in Western Europe, all Christians were Catholic. Majority of Christians were Catholic, right? The next one, the head of Catholic Church is the Pope. When the Pope dies, a new Pope is elected by the cardinals in the Sistine Chapel. To protest means to speak out against. For example, right now there's a lot of protests against police brutality. There's protests against masks, right? Like there's people protest for different reasons. To reform means to change. If you want to reform something, you change it. For example, there's parents that send their kids to reform school, and that's a school where they try to change their behaviors. According to the medieval church, you could go to heaven not by reading the Bible yourself, because remember, the Bible, most people didn't have access to the Bible at this time. The Bible was controlled by the church. So you entered heaven by going to church and asking the priest for forgiveness, by doing the sacraments, and the sacraments are done by the church. And you'll see that this is really important later. This is one of the big issues that the church faces later. Which of the following are reasons why people could not access the Bible? One, most people couldn't read. Two, there weren't many Bibles around because they had to be done by hand. Three, the Bible's written in Latin. So even if there were many Bibles, they were written in a language that people could not understand. The Catholic Church of the medieval period was very powerful, very rich, and also very influential in the lives of most Europeans. Which of the following is not a sacrament? Remember, the sacraments are those seven rituals that Catholics do. It's baptism is one, marriage, and communion. Communion is with the bread. One of the sacraments is not reading the Bible, right? That's not one of the sacraments. For this one, I was looking for two things. According to the Catholic Church, what would happen if you were excommunicated? One, you were kicked out of the church. If you are kicked out of the church, you can no longer practice the sacraments. And if you can't do the sacraments, you will go to hell. So I was looking for two words, sacraments and going to hell. Okay. We do have a video today, so today's video might be a little longer than usual. And we also have some text that we have to go over. During the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church was the single most powerful organization in Western Europe. So the Catholic Church is a Christian church. It's a Christian religion. You'll see that at this time in Western Europe, there is one Christian religion, and that is the Catholic Church. There were many reasons for its power, so there are many reasons why the church is powerful. First, people during the Middle Ages were very religious, right? Very, very religious. Think of the most religious person. That is the people of the Middle Ages. They believed that the Roman Catholic Church represented God here on earth. So they believed that they needed the church to get them to heaven. They believed that the Roman Catholic Church represented God on earth and held the power. So the Catholic Church held the power to send a person to heaven or hell. So if you are afraid of going to hell, you are going to listen to the church. If you want to go to heaven, you are going to listen to the church. In addition, many nobles left land to the church when they died, hoping to gain entry into heaven, like a goodwill, right? So these nobles left land to the church, hoping that this would help them enter heaven, like a good act. Therefore, the church became Western Europe's largest landowner, very, very wealthy landowner. Church wealth also increased through tithes. There's that word again, remember tithes? The taxes, right? Or church taxes, which all Catholics were required to pay. There is penalty if you don't pay it, right? You can go to jail, you can be fined. Finally, the church was the main center of learning. So there weren't any regular schools like today. They were all based on religion. Church officials were usually the only people who could read or write. Some priests couldn't even read or write. Rulers often relied on church officials since they were the most educated people during the Middle Ages. While Europeans were divided in small kingdoms, the one institution that united people during the Middle Ages was the Roman Catholic Church. So people in Western Europe, they believed they had different languages, they had different governments, they looked different, but they all had something in common, most of them, and that was their belief in the Catholic religion, and this Christian religion. So these questions you don't have to do, but you should think about them, okay? Because they do help you a lot. For example, what is a tithe? You need to know what that is, and how did it increase power and wealth of the church? Why did rulers rely on church officials? So I might include some of these on your Edpuzzle questions, okay? During the Middle Ages, monks and nuns copy books. So these are people that work for the church from the past to make more copies. So all these Bibles were created by hand. That means that there's not that many of them, and that means that they are all in a language that most Europeans can read. They did this by hand because no one in Europe had invented a machine to copy words. That doesn't come until the 1400s during the Renaissance. They decorated these books with bright colored pictures. They're called illuminated manuscripts. Over time, the largest monasteries, a place where monks lived together, and convents, a place where nuns lived together, became centers of learning. The monks and nuns kept alive, learning from the past. Even though the central government collapsed with the fall of the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church remained strong. There is no one kingdom that rules Europe, but there is one religion that does. Barbarians had converted to Catholicism. Remember, the barbarians invaded the Roman Empire and they divided it? They converted to Catholicism. The Roman Catholic Church always had a tradition of monastic life, or a person devoting his or her life to the church by forsaking marriage and family. Monks and nuns promised never to marry. These are people that live in are part of the church. You'll see that there's going to be a monk that creates a big problem for the church. Okay, so remember that word monk. Monks and nuns promised to never marry and to never own property and to never disobey their superiors in the church. There's going to be a monk, though. There's always one that's going to create issues for the church. They spent their lives praying, studying, and working. As education outside of the church declined due to the dangers of travel, education within the church remained strong as monks and nuns preserved some knowledge of the past. In addition, the Byzantine Empire, you may remember what the Byzantine Empire was. It was the Eastern Roman Empire. The preservation of Greek and Roman ideas occurred. It is important to remember that the barbarians destroyed Rome and that many of the great Greek and Roman works were destroyed in Rome. However, the Byzantine Empire was so this is not as much as this is not really relevant. This has to do with the Eastern Roman Empire, and we're talking about religion and the Catholic Church. Okay, think about these questions. The Roman Catholic Church was the single largest unifying. A lot of this is repetitive. Unifying institution in medieval Europe. It touched everyone's lives, no matter what their rank or class or where they lived. With the exception of a small number of Jews, everyone in Europe was a Roman Catholic Christian during the Middle Ages, from the richest kings down to the lowest serfs. A serf is like a peasant, like a slave. From the moment of its baptism, remember the baptism? This is one of the sacraments, right? So I'm going to just write sacrament. That's one of them. From the moment of baptism, a few days after birth, a child entered into a life of service to God and God's church. As the child grew, it will be taught basic prayer, will go to church every week unless they were ill or sick, and would learn of its responsibilities to the church. Every person was required to live by the church's laws and to pay heavy taxes to support the church, right? The way they see it is, I'm providing for the church and the church will provide something for me, which would be salvation. So you give the church money and time, and in return the church gives you the tools to enter heaven. And that's what made it make sense. In return for this, they were shown the way to everlasting life and happiness after lives that were often hard and short and hard. The head of the Catholic Church is called the Pope. As God's representative on earth, the Pope had a great amount of power to influence kings and their advisors. If someone went against the church, the Pope had the power to excommunicate them. This means that the person could not attend any church services or receive the sacraments and would go straight to hell when they died. At a time when everyone believed in heaven and hell and all belonged to the church, this was an awful punishment because you are being removed from the church. Okay, I'll go over the exit ticket in a second, but let's watch a short video. Hopefully, it's on here.
In medieval times, nearly everyone in Western Europe belonged to the Roman Catholic faith. And although not every person was a sincere believer, this was a time when most people held deep religious beliefs. In fact, about 1 out of 10 medieval people became monks or nuns, devoting their entire adult lives to the service of God.
So that does not mean that only 10% became Catholic. That's not what it's saying. Most Europeans at this time are Catholic. With this part of the video saying that 1 out of 10 or 10% became nuns or monks.
Locked away behind the walls of monasteries. 800 years ago, lords and ladies supported the church with income from manor lands, and often paid the wages of priests as well. Noble families helped to maintain parish churches in the villages on their estates, in part because they believed that such acts of generosity would help them reach heaven. Wealthy nobles also paid to have beautiful funeral monuments made, and to have prayers and masses said for the souls of their family members after death. Even the poor serfs were expected to give 1/10 of their crops to support their village church, even though it was a great hardship for them. And although travel was dangerous in medieval times, some people made long pilgrimages to holy shrines as acts of religious devotion. But what medieval people are really the most famous for are the huge cathedrals they built all across Europe. These cathedrals, with their soaring towers and delicate stonework.
So think about who paid for this, right? How was the church able to pay for all this?
Are not only great monuments to faith, they are equally great monuments to the skill of medieval architects, artists, and builders. It took hundreds of years to construct most medieval cathedrals, but when they were done, they were truly magnificent places in which to worship, places that filled people's hearts with the mystery and glory of God. Their towering walls held brilliantly colored stained glass windows, depicting sacred images and stories from the Bible.
So remember the stained glass? It has stories from the Bible because this is one of the ways that the church teaches people about the Bible, because people can't read.
These windows served to instruct churchgoers in religion, because back then most people could not read or write. Sculptors were kept very busy carving stone for new churches, and their incredible designs give us a glimpse into the medieval imagination. Directly over the doorway of this French cathedral is a stone carving with a powerful reminder about the consequences of sin. It shows the day of judgment. Here God is depicted as the large figure in the center. At his left hand, those who led lives of sin are being condemned to an eternity of suffering in hell, while on his right hand, those who led good lives are being rewarded with an eternity of happiness in heaven.
So a good life in this case means listening to the church. So it is a way for people to see what the consequences are going to be if you don't follow the teachings of the church.
It is interesting that, unlike ordinary people, most members of the clergy could read and write. And in a time before the invention of the printing press, it was the clergy who copied books by hand. It was also during the medieval era that the Catholic Church founded nearly all of the great European universities. In medieval society, a cathedral like this one was the special church of a bishop. Bishops held a high position in the church and belonged to the same feudal class as the noble lords. They also possessed great political power, because in medieval Europe, the Catholic Church was more powerful than any feudal state.
Or any feudal king.
The role of religion in the Middle Ages. The medieval church played a far greater role in medieval England than the church does today. In medieval England, the church dominated everybody's life. All medieval people, whether they were kings, nobles, or serfs, believed that God, heaven, and hell all existed. From the very earliest of ages, the people were taught that the only way they could get to heaven was if the Roman Catholic Church let them. The local church was the center of town life. People attended weekly ceremonies. They were married, confirmed, baptized, and buried at the church.
So those are the sacraments, right? Marriage, confirmation, baptism, the last rites, and there's one more. That's when you tell the priest your sins.
The church even confirmed kings on their throne, giving them the divine right to rule. The Catholic Church became very rich and powerful during the Middle Ages. People gave the church 1/10 of their earnings in what is called a tithe. They also paid the church for various sacraments such as baptism, marriage, and communion. People also paid penances to the church for their sins they committed. The wealthy often gave the church land. Eventually, the church owned about 1/3 of the land in Western Europe. Because the church was considered independent, they did not have to pay the king any tax for their land. Leaders of the church became rich and powerful. Many nobles became leaders, such as abbots or bishops, were built. Sometimes constructed ceilings rested on buttresses
This is something else.
as packed king
Okay,
down.
so let me go over the exit tickets for today. Actually, I don't have it with me right now. But the exit ticket is going to focus on, I'll just read it to you. There's a question that says, why did most people in medieval Europe depend on the church to learn about God? There's two answers here. And then you'll have a CEE. Explain how the Catholic Church touched the lives of Europeans during the Middle Ages. Use the informational documents. That's this one. This one. You can use this one if you want. Use the informational document called the Age of Faith as your evidence. You can also use the video if you want. If you would like to use this video, you can. You cite the video by saying religion in the Middle Ages. You can say in the video called religion in the Middle Ages. And you can have one piece of evidence from the video, one piece of evidence from the text, or you can have two from the text and two from the video. It's up to you. So provide two pieces of evidence to support your answer. This is a CEE, EE. You'll be assessed on writing a CEE in your next assessments. This is worth 4 points in the exit ticket. So if you get a 4, that means it's like an M. A 3 is like an S plus. A 2 is an S or an S minus, and a 1 is an N. A score of 4 has a solid claim with 2 relevant pieces of evidence. Explanation elaborates on how the evidence supports the claim, and the source is cited. Okay, please take this seriously. It's really important. The exit ticket is really important for me to see, especially this CEE. So we're focusing on how did the church impact society? What evidence do you have to support that the church impacted or touched the lives of people? Okay. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.